Okay, today we've got a 2015 Nissan Juke, and what I'm doing is I'm putting a split boot where the boot on the front right axle has split or had broken, and the grease there has leaked out. Now, I was lucky in that I caught it before the grease had completely leaked out and that dirt and grime and stuff got into the CV joint there. So I didn't clean it all out because I didn't need to, because it's not contaminated yet. So what I'm doing is I'm going to replace it with the split boot, and the split boot is a lock boot, model 614-700, and I'm going to say here, disclaimer, this is for entertainment and reference only. I'm not telling you how to do it, and I'm not telling you that you should do it. This is what I'm doing to buy a few more miles out of my Nissan Juke. Alright, so first thing I did was show you the old boot here. This is where it split, right at the neck of the small end there. It split right there. This is where I cut it, so that's me. This is what happened to the boot. So and it leaked quite profusely all over the underside, so I cleaned it up. So alright, I've already taken the wheel off, but obviously the first thing you want to do is you want to jack it up. Use a jack stand, so in case the jack gives out, it'll just rest on the jack stand and won't come down on you or come down on the brake disc here. And then once you get the wheel off, I won't go through all that. You should know how to take a wheel off if you're going to do this yourself. I've already done some pre-work, but I just wanted to show you this shield in place. This shield here is going to get in your way of working, so I recommend taking this out. It's got two bolts back there, and then a nut up here, and they're all 16 millimeters, but what I found was a 5/8 wrench works if you have don't have a 16 millimeter. This nut here you are going to need a deep socket for, so like I said, I didn't have a 16 millimeter deep socket, so I used a 5/8 deep socket. And once you get it broken loose, just back out this nut here. Just follow what's holding the shield on, and you'll know what to pull off. And the best way this shield comes out is towards the back of the car. So just come out. Just kind of have to wiggle it, and then it comes right out, and that's that shield. So once that's out, then you have access to clean out the CV joint after you cut the boot apart, or whatever you need to do. What I did was you have to remove the bands. This is what the band kind of looks like when you first get ready to pop it open. You have to release this little tab here. This tab was bent forward to keep this from popping out. So once you bend that up, you can get your screwdriver underneath and pop it out, because these little barbs here keep the band from popping up, and this keeps this end from popping up. So then once you pop it out, you can grab your pliers and just lift it, and then the band will come out. After you get the band off the front and back. So the tricky thing with the Nissan Juke axle is that it is not round. The part that goes in the transmission is not a round cylinder. It's got little indentations in it, so you can't just use the split boot that you buy. You actually have to leave the outer collar of the original boot And what I did was I just took a utility knife and I cut around. And what the other thing I suggest is you jack up both sides of the front end so you can actually turn the wheel in order to like leave the knife here, rotate it, cut a little bit, rotate it, cut a little bit more, rotate it, cut a little more until you get it all off. Now here's what remains, right? So you want to cut and leave that ring, because see how it's not round? Yeah. So to put a round boot around there, it's not going to work, because you need the shape of that contour and then the roundness of the outside to put the new split boot on. That's the first few steps. And then of course if you need to, you can back this off all the way off. You can back this all the way off here and then flush that out if you need to. I'm not going to flush it out because I don't need to, but then slip it back. There's some markings from the old band, so keep in mind how you took it off is how you got to put it back on, because I don't think it's symmetrical. It may be. It looks like it might be. Before I bought the boot, what I did was I measured the outer diameter, this part of the boot, and then there's a recess here. I couldn't quite measure this recess with my dial calipers. I measured like this and made sure that what I bought would at least go over that, but actually there's a little recess, so be mindful when you measure the small part of the shaft that you measure the little recess. I don't know if you can push it back or not, but anyway, so this is this little recess of the boot is 1 inch, and this is 4 inches. So you got 1 inch and 4 inch. So the boot comes with specifications, and if you look up the part number, the specification for this boot said that this end was 4 inches diameter opening, and then this end was 0.8 inches diameter. But what it doesn't tell you are what the other diameters are. So when you look at the inside, I cut this off to get to the right diameter. It's kind of stepped, so this first, the smaller step is 0.8, and I believe it gets like 1/8 of an inch bigger with every step. So I just trimmed it to where this opening was as close to 1 inch as possible, and I cut it to a little bit of the bigger side, because what's going to happen is when I go to glue it, I don't want it to be too small, because then the seam won't close properly. So you want it just a little bit bigger, because when you clamp it down, it's going to seal up tight. The boot comes in 2 pieces. I've already glued one piece, and there's a seam right there. I used brake cleaner. And I flushed out both sides of this seam, and then they give you this bottle of what appears to be super glue. Smells like super glue, but then what you want to do is let it dry, right? Let all the brake cleaner dry, and then really jam the tip of this super glue bottle into the recess. Right, there's a couple of holes there that receive these 2 tabs, and it's not too critical that you get this sealed just right, because that's where the clamp's going to go, but it is critical that you get enough in the seam to make sure that it's sealed up properly. They give you plenty of super glue, so don't worry about using too much. Obviously, use half, no more than half for the first side, and then you can use the half for the other side. And what I also found was that it was kind of cold last night. It was like 50 degrees in the garage, and this wasn't drying or curing. So what I did was I took tape. I took just painter's tape, and I taped the seam together to make sure that it doesn't pull apart while it's curing. And then I also took like a carpenter clamp, one of the squeeze clamps, and I clamped to make sure this end was tight. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some sandpaper and just sand that smooth. I won't make you watch that. And then also sand the inside smooth. Now I can't really do that on this side because I have to glue it in place. But that's pretty much the first part of getting the boot put together. Now that you clean the CV joint if you need to, and make sure everything is nice and dry, because what's going to happen is you're going to need to get this around the axle and then glue it in place. I'll try to explain while I'm putting it in, and if it's hard to see, I'll record. I'll explain after I get it in what I did. You want to get the boot in there, and I like to go from the bottom so I can see what I'm doing. So feed it there. The joint's pretty solid, so you should, given that this is going to be rotating, should be able to manipulate it. There you go. All right. So I've got it on there, and just test fit to make sure that this is going to close. Yep. So that closes nicely. But anyway, that is getting it in. Pretty simple. All right. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to try to dry fit it together so I can glue it. What this will allow me to figure out is I might glue it and then put the clamp on it just to keep that there, to keep the small end in that little recess, and then I'll run tape around the outside to keep the seams together. I'm going to put the glue in this seam very liberally, and this stuff it's pretty forgiving. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to set up, and of course when it's cold it takes a while longer, but it's warmed up. It's about 60 degrees in here, so hopefully it won't set up too quickly and give me enough time to put everything together and then push it back to where I can put the hose clamp on this small end, and then I'll put the hose clamp on the large end, and then I'll get tape all around to make sure the seam doesn't pop back open. So all right, here comes the glue. Again, you want to really get this in that groove, and don't be stingy with it, because this is the one chance you get. You get one chance. If you missed a spot, it's gonna leak on you, which isn't too terrible, because at least, if it leaks out and it's small enough, dirt and stuff shouldn't get in, because that's more what you're worried about, is dirt getting in to the CV joint. All right. Oop, my glove is sticking. All right, I think I got plenty. It looks like, and I only use like a quarter of that, a quarter of the glue that was left in the bottle here. All right, so here's the tricky part. I gotta get this. All right, now the rest of it. Again, what's nice is this stuff's pretty forgiving. That's in place. Alright, so what I did, hard to see, was I got electrical tape, and I taped one side and stretched the tape across the seam, and to let it pull the seam together, and it looks like it's holding. So I just need it to hold until it cures. So I'm gonna let it cure for at least an hour. And then what I'll do is I'll tighten the small end up, and I can pull this back, squirt it full of grease, put it back over, and tighten the band back down in the back, and that should be the end of it. And of course I got to put the shield back on, and then we should be good to go. It's been more than 24 hours, so I'm gonna peel all this tape off. Smooth that all the way out of the way. Yeah, now I got a good gap to squirt the grease in. Yeah, I guess I could have packed it a little bit before I put the boot on there, but I didn't want to take a chance on it dripping on the seam. But once it gets rolling, it should distribute that grease pretty good in there. It's got a good amount of grease in it already from the old boot. Alright, that's all she wrote for the grease. Yeah. It's kind of like the packet of Velveeta shells and cheese, the cheese packet. Alright. Now, let's make sure it's not cockeyed. And then what I gotta do is I gotta cut these little tabs off here when I'm done. But they're kind of helpful to get it on. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm using my finger to check the spacing to make sure the spacing is the same or about the same all the way around, because it's sitting kind of cockeyed right now. So okay, I was able to get the boot to go one more step back, so there's a little bit of overhang. I got to trim that off, but I'm gonna let it overhang just because it's gonna be a pain to try to trim. I don't want to trim too much off. But now I'm gonna rotate the axle so I can tighten this back up. Not a perfect repair, but it'll buy you about it'll buy you a year or two, or until you can get another axle. And no, I didn't forget to put the shield back on. So there's a new boot. Here's the shield. Don't forget the shield. All right. Some people are gonna ask or leave a comment saying, well, why didn't you just replace the whole axle? Well, there's 4 reasons why. First reason was time. It would have taken about a week to get an axle. Where we are, they don't carry this axle in auto parts stores or even at the dealership, so you have to special order it. And it would have, the minimum was a week to get here, and we didn't have a week before we needed to drive the car again. Second reason is it's much cheaper to get a temporary repair so we could start driving the car again. That boot was about what, 30 bucks?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, the boot was 30 bucks, and the least expensive axle I think was $80 something plus shipping, and if you go to the dealership it was like $400. And it just so happens the Wright's passenger for an all-wheel drive is very hard to get, because most of them are two-wheel drive model axles, but the all-wheel drive models are the most expensive of all the axles. Now I don't know if you could use a two-wheel drive axle on an all-wheel drive application or not, but we didn't want to take a chance of getting the two-wheel drive and it not fitting in the all-wheel drive. Number 3, time. The other, time in putting it in. It would have taken probably more time to take everything apart, more complex, more bolts to take apart. And since we caught it early, it was worth saving. And the 4th reason is if you try to replace the axle, you have to pull it out of the transmission, and the transmission fluid will leak out. And the problem with this car is that the transmission dipstick, the way you would fill the transmission back up, is sealed. So yeah, you can pop this little cap off and refill it again, but I think these kinds of caps, once you pull it off, you break the tab or something. I'm sure there's videos on how to take it off without breaking that cap, but then you have to measure how much fluid came out, because I don't think there's a dipstick, I think it's just a cap. So you have to measure how much came out and kind of guesstimate how much to put back in. So that's the other reason why We just, I guess luck would have it, we couldn't get the shaft, and then come to find out more things about replacing that axle, other things that are involved. So anyway, for those who leave comments why we didn't do a whole axle, there you go.
I'm over it.
Stick a fork in me!
Enough is enough.
Join us 5 days a week. Attend for a morning or half day. Interact with our engaging teachers. We offer classes for pre-K and up at comfortable family rates. Enough is enough. Get your year back on track for a customized spring semester. Enroll at Advanced Academics today.